Good evening and welcome to tonight's neighborhood meeting. Let me get the schedule. Hold on. Okay, sorry. Good evening and welcome to tonight's neighborhood meeting. My name is Michelle Freethy and I am a senior planner with the city's Development Services Department. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to present to you, the neighborhood, a development concept being considered by the development team of 145 Bradford Street and 48 Ellen Street, prior to a formal development application being submitted to the city. This provides an opportunity for the development team to hear initial community feedback and incorporate it into their plans prior to making a full and formal development application to the city. Please be aware we are recording this meeting for the public record. The recording will be used for the purpose of garnering your input and responding to inquiries, and will be considered public information. Please also be aware that as a registered attendee tonight, your email address will be added to the mailing list so that you can receive further information about this application as it progresses. Should you have any questions regarding this collection, please contact the Development Services Department. I would also like to let you know that there are staff behind the scenes managing the technology tonight. They're here to make sure the meeting runs smoothly, to grant participants the opportunity to speak, and to assist with any questions in the chat. Please bear with us if we have any issues. And if for some reason you get disconnected, please feel free to log in again. For introduction, I have myself, Michelle Freethy, running the meeting. We have Councillor Nixon, who is attending tonight, and we have the applicant's consultant, Jones Consulting Group, who represents the applicant and will briefly provide an overview of the development proposal and answer any questions that you may have. Expectations. The intent of tonight's meeting is to provide members of the public with an opportunity to become familiar with the development application and the planning and review process, and to also ask the applicant questions and provide feedback. What to expect: a brief overview of the city's review process and timing, a presentation from the applicant's representative describing the proposal, and an opportunity to ask questions of either the applicant or city staff and provide comments or identify concerns with the application. What not to expect: city staff recommendations on the application or a detailed analysis on the proposal. This will occur later in the review process, or a debate on the merits of the proposal between city staff and the applicant. Next steps. Before we get into the presentation, I just want to quickly highlight the next steps in the application process. The neighborhood meeting is established early in the development process to ensure local concerns are incorporated and addressed through the city's review. After this meeting, we expect that the applicant will make a formal submission for this development project. Formal submissions undergo a full technical review and must address comments received from the neighborhood meeting, from the city's technical departments and external agencies, and from members of the public more broadly. In conjunction with this, a statutory public meeting will be held virtually on the application at Affordability Committee. At a public meeting, applicants present their application At a public meeting, applicants present their application to council, answer questions, and provide an overview of and response to any issues, concerns identified during a prior neighborhood meeting. As part of the public meeting, members of the public also have an opportunity to provide verbal or written comments. Following a public meeting, staff will continue the technical review process and the applicants will make any necessary revisions to the development proposal. Once the review process has concluded, a staff recommendation report is brought forward to council for their consideration. All comments received through the review process, including those received at the neighborhood and public meetings, are identified and addressed in the staff report and form part of staff's recommendation on the subject application. A staff report for this particular application could be brought forward to council early next year, depending on when the application is received. I will now move on to the applicant's presentation. As I mentioned, the proposed project will be presented first, which we will follow with a question and comment period. So tonight, we are focusing on a zoning bylaw amendment being considered at 145 Bradford Street and 48 Allen Street. The applicant's planner is Ray Duhamel from Jones Consulting Group. The proposal will facilitate a mixed-use development with 5 towers ranging in height from 45 to 55 stories and 1,582 residential units, including 316 affordable units and ground floor commercial uses. I will now hand the meeting over to Ray, who will first introduce himself and then share his presentation on the proposed development. So I'll stop sharing, Ray, and then I'll let you share your screen.
Thank you, Michelle.
Welcome.
Can everyone see my screen? Michelle, can you confirm if my screen is visible?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Welcome to the neighborhood meeting, everyone. I'm excited to be here tonight. I hope you are as well. We're really looking forward to hearing the comments that you have on this exciting and challenging project at 145 Bradford Street. I have a presentation that's a little bit longer than normal, given the magnitude of the project that is being presented to you tonight. I wanted to provide a lot of information and to help hopefully provide some helpful information about the background work that's being undertaken, the nature of the development itself, and the policy context and objectives of this overall project. So I will start now with my presentation. Okay. So the site, as I'm sure everyone on this neighborhood meeting is aware, but if not, if there's others attending the neighborhood meeting that aren't familiar, it's at the end of the bay, basically about halfway between Lakeshore Drive and Innisfil Street, right in the middle. It has 3 actual road frontages. It has technical frontage along John Street, and then it also has frontage, a larger stretch along Bradford Street, and then even longer stretch along Allen Street. And that's delineated in the black boundary on this plan. And what you can kind of see in this aerial photograph is kind of 3 segments of this section of the downtown of Barrie. And so you have the Lakeshore Drive arterial road that everybody's familiar with, and you have existing towers at Victoria Street and Allen Street that are oriented towards the water and towards Lakeshore Drive. And then you've obviously got large public parkland along our beautiful waterfront. And then the second section is this middle section. You've got the waste treatment plant to the south, this existing site, and commercial uses that are along Bradford Street that date back 40, 50 plus years. And then you have over on Sanford Street towards Innisfil Street, this section right here, which is really it's a historic neighborhood with a lot of low density, single detached dwellings. There's a variety of housing types of different forms in there, but it's a good, stable, attractive neighborhood back here. And so there's basically 3 elements overall in this area. And so the area that's proposed for development is known as Michelle had mentioned, it's 145 Bradford Street, which is effectively most of this rectangle. And then there's also a 48 Allen Street, which has an Owen Signcraft business sign on it. So Owen Signcraft worked out of that site for years. The overall property area is about 1.3 hectares or just under 3.3 acres in total. And as I noted, there's the various frontages listed on the slide for you on those 3 roadways. And one of the biggest questions I anticipate this evening is why this site? And so I wanted to talk to you about the site-specific features of this particular property because I'm a land use planning consultant. If Michelle didn't note that, or I didn't at the beginning of this presentation, I've been working in Barrie for almost 30 years. I live in Barrie, I work in Barrie, my business is here, and I do a good chunk of my planning work in the city of Barrie. So I have a vested interest in Barrie. I love the city, and I would say that as a general framework, if somebody walked into my office and said they wanted to build a 54-story building, there's not a whole lot of sites in the city of Barrie that I think would be automatically attractive or appropriate for that type of density. So it really comes down to analyzing different properties and understanding the policy framework that's in effect, which I'm going to share with you in a minute. But certainly the size of this property is large enough to be able to do a substantial development. The property is deep enough and has enough road frontage to provide for options for access and to make the site functional and operative. As you can imagine, there could have been a very narrow property that's the same size that would have been very restrictive in its ability to develop. And even across the street on Bradford Street on the west side of Bradford, the lot depths are generally much shallower than what this overall property has. The site's vacant, and I'll go into the history of it. It used to be a car dealership, classic Dodge, but it is vacant now. And the site parameters for the city has already reviewed this site and provided for a tall building on the site. So the question of whether or not a tall building is appropriate has already been vetted by a previous council and staff review. But overall, tall buildings, somewhere at 65 meters in height, what's permitted today. So let's say just for depending on ceiling heights, that might be 20 stories or so. But the question about a tall building has already been considered. But then you have to look about the surrounding context. And that's one of the reasons why I broke up and described the Sanford Street. I think, try to redevelop an individual Sanford Street lot with a 54-story building would be entirely inappropriate in the context of trying to mitigate impacts on immediate surrounding historic neighborhoods and, what is a stable neighborhood. This site, by comparison, there's only a couple of, residential dwellings that are left. There's conversions of existing dwellings. Basically, the east side of Bradford Street is entirely commercial or the wastewater treatment plant, except for the residential towers that, of course, are on Ellen and Victoria Streets. So those are some of the reasons that make this site more attractive to more density and more mixed use on the site. Also, Bradford Street for decades has been a street that needs investment and revitalization. And I will show you some information on that as well. And not the least of which site is located within what's within the downtown, but more specifically, the planning term is within the urban growth center. And that's the place where you grow up instead of out to try to reduce your requirements and needs for boundary expansions, which happens to be on council's agenda this evening, as well as being able to collect city taxes on a smaller parcel, and the overall financial benefits that it provides for the city. So this next slide is a slide that shows the historical context of this property over the years. So I have aerial photography going back to 1954, but it's very pixelated. But effectively, Bradford Street in the early 50s was mostly just a residential neighborhood. And then by the time the middle of the 70s came around, there's a number of commercial developments, and you can kind of see these on the plan, the commercial development here. There was industrial along the waterfront. There was commercial development across the street, up the street. There's a lot of commercial development that substantially in its current form existed in 1978. And there's been continuing convergence, extensions of those commercial uses over the decades. By the time we hit the 90s, the Ellen Street apartments had been built. And then by the time we got into the 2010s, the Victoria Street apartments were built. But Bradford Street has demonstrably remained unchanged. It's a commercial strip with ground-oriented development. And that's what we basically find ourselves today. So fast forward another 12 years, 13 years now in 2025, and the area is much the same. So Bradford is in desperate need, and it's been recognized for decades for an infusion of investment. And the only thing that has existed on this site is back in the 70s, there was a car dealership that extended, as you can see, into 1998. And the dealership had been demolished by the time we got to 2012. Here's a few shots. I won't belabor this. Anybody's probably familiar with this area, but the site's currently vacant. There's a fence around it, and the property at 48 Ellen Street has an existing building, and there's the Owen Signcraft sign you can see there. And then there's just some surrounding buildings for some area context. the Ellen Street apartments in the top right, and then some other smattering of commercial and other buildings. So now we're on to the policy framework, and I'm going to promise you I won't spend a lot of time boring you to death about policy, about what the city's official plan says. And what an official plan document is a guiding land use principle document that explains how the city should grow over decades. So in this case, it's to the year 2051. And so what it's identified is this property, basically both sides of Bradford Street. You can see much less depth on the west side, but much deeper on the east side, including Ellen Street and beyond, is all within what's called the high density category. And then as you get past Sanford towards Tiffin, that's in a medium density category. So you can kind of see the difference. So the city anticipates growth along this downtown area and along Bradford Street over the life of the plan. And it actually provides for, more specifically, that it's within the urban growth center, within the downtown, and on an intensification corridor. And it provides for a point of framework where the city's document says there shall be a minimum of 300 units per hectare developed within these high density areas. And the city's undertaking a zoning bylaw review to update its zoning bylaw to implement the new official plan to basically say the same thing. And then the policies in the official plan go further and say, well, if you're going to be more than 25 stories in height, then there's some extra considerations that need to be evaluated as part of that application. And that includes, but is certainly not limited to, the need and demand. So the need for housing, or the need for the extra height, the demand for that extra height, the provisions of affordable and or attainable housing, and whether or not overall high quality design is incorporated. And then in addition to these very specific tests in the official plan, there's a whole lot of policy documentation about making sure that it's an appropriate, compatible, and well-designed site. So then the next key document is the zoning document. This has already been amended a number of years ago, more than 10, I think. And the majority of the site is zoned in what's called the C2-2 zone, the commercial 2-2 zone. And then the 48 Ellen Street property is actually in the C4 zone, or general commercial zone. And the C2-2 zone permits height of 65 meters. And there's a whole variety of special provisions about setbacks and coverage and a variety of things that I don't have time to go into them all now, but they're spelt right out in the city's zoning bylaw when a previous application had come forward to redevelop the classic Dodge site. And this application a new application would be required for zoning bylaw amendment to permit the built form that's proposed in this application. And sorry, I should mention 65 meters. If that translating that into stories is somewhere around 20 stories. It just depends how high each individual ceiling height would be. Okay. So what happens when somebody walks in and says they have a site in a growth area that and they want to develop it with a high density building? We have to establish from a design perspective, what are we trying to work towards? And I will say that in this particular instance, the team worked for months and months, that being the architect and the owner and myself, on how to deliver affordable housing on this site. And so I would say, as a general framework, affordability is a very key part of the planning process. It's a provincial interest, a matter of provincial interest, but it's often an afterthought by some in the development process. And when you're developing high density housing of the nature proposed this evening, it can't be an afterthought. You have to actually think about the affordable housing at the front end of the project and design around that. And that's where a great deal of time was spent by Michael McKnight and his team at MCL Architects, which is a local architectural firm, to figure out how much space those affordable units would occupy, how they would be designed, their specific layouts, where they would be located, on what floor, how they would be accessed, etc. So a great deal of time was spent from a design perspective, and it shaped the project on affordable housing. And then a second part of the design vision was to provide comfort to Barrie residents and council and staff that the community and project benefits that will be developed as part of this project would be introduced as part of the first phase. So we wanted to avoid the scenario where the suggestion, for example, of affordable housing units would be provided on phase 5 or some other phase and say, basically, trust us, it'll be developed at some future date. And we spent a great deal of time creating a project that delivered a significant amount of community and project benefit in the first phase of the project. So either the project proceeds and those community benefits are realized, or the project doesn't proceed. It's really that simple. And that was a design vision that we established at the get-go. And then the third element was to really consider transformative density on Bradford Street. So as those historical photos showed, Bradford Street really hasn't changed a whole lot in 40 years. And I would say it's, putting it mildly, it is not an area that has received a whole lot of investment. I think the city has recognized, and I recognize the land use planner and staff recognizes that there's a whole lot of potential on Bradford Street. But because of existing development that is already in place, because of the adjacency sometimes of historic neighborhoods right on the west side of Bradford Street, because of potential soil contamination or the size and the shallowness of lots, it's going to continue to take time to revitalize Bradford Street. And what this project what we tried to achieve with this project from a vision perspective is to really create a transformative amount of density and investment in Bradford Street to really kickstart a significant change in what Bradford Street will look like over the long term, basically just to improve it and obtain the city's long-term vision of real dynamic Bradford streetscape. And I think if we don't go big on parcels that you can go big, then those opportunities are lost to be transformative. And in this case, perhaps in 30 years, we will all be, whoever replaces me at someday, and who replaces Michelle, will be looking back and going, I hope we can now start to develop Bradford Street. So when there's an opportunity, I think that's when you should take those chances. And then the last part is Michael McKnight and his officers. They're no stranger to design awards and their ability to deliver high quality urban design and really a signature architecture. And that was what we were going after. And that's what the owner kept stressing to the team is really a landmark building that will separate itself from others and something that the city and its residents can be proud of. So with that in mind, Michael McKnight's office have created basically an architectural package that's been uploaded that we will continue to refine. And this is, if you're looking down from the sky, this is a site plan. It's basically a two-dimensional plan that outlines, here's Ellen Street and John Street and Bradford Street. And you basically have a podium, which is an area where you have units and parking built out. And then you have on top of it, you have 5 towers. And you can see each of those 5 towers. And tower number C is the first tower to go. Notwithstanding it has the letter C. And then the access points are shown off of Ellen Street. There will be additional access points for individual units, residential units on John, and then there will be commercial storefront access onto Bradford Street. Overall, I think Michelle mentioned in her presentation, there's approximately 1,580 units that are proposed. And the big part of that is that there's 20% of those units, or 316 units, will be affordable. And if there's any questions about the affordability part of it, I'd like, Michael McKnight, who's on the project team, the project architect, can probably share the challenges that we've been redeveloping the OPP station, the former OPP station on Rose Street, and how much it costs to develop that site for, and Mike will have to correct me, I think less than 200 affordable units. And it's in the $250 million range to deliver those. So this will be an unprecedented level of privately delivered affordable housing. I've never seen any project deliver the number that's being proposed as part of this project. And that's what can happen when you think big and transformative in a landmark development. And then unlike some of the other developments that have been proposed in this area and other parts of the city, there's actually one parking space space per market unit that's proposed that meets the City of Barrie zoning bylaw requirements for parking. And then there's a reduction that would be requested for the affordable units. So less parking for those specific units, of course, because they're affordable in nature. And so how does that site plan manifest itself? Well, the owner retained and a person that was a drone expert who actually raised the drone up into the air and took shots, and then we provided them to a renderer who basically took Michael McKnight's a detailed architectural package and transformed that into an illustration of what this could look like as a landmark building at the end of the bay. And I think this shot, if again, I've labeled Bradford and John Ellen's in behind at Victoria Streets to give you that context. And when I refer to the podium, it's this part of the building that I'm speaking about. And that podium, rather than having a singular architectural design detail, and we really would like input on what you think of the architectural design, because a great deal of work went into it, but it's trying to break up that podium. And many of these floors have the affordable residential units circling the perimeter of the affordable of the podium, with the parking and the driveway to get up to the different levels of parking on the interior. So parking is not, because of the high groundwater table on the site, the parking is proposed to go internal and up as opposed to go down. Okay, so the next slide, this is the ground floor from Ellen Street. So you can see the Ellen Street access. This is effectively a 2-story space where all the traffic, the truck movement, garbage truck pickup, for example, loading spaces, the access to the ramps right here where my cursor is, if you can see that, to go up through the podium. Everything is internalized on this site. So the external relationships to John and Bradford on Ellen Street, as you can, oops, actually, I'm just going to go back. On Ellen Street, as you can see, these blue units are we're calling them townhouses, but effectively think of 2-story units built into the podium itself with direct pedestrian access out onto the street, both onto Ellen and onto John Street. And then this is internal parking. This isn't parking that you will see. This is underground parking. Effectively, it's underground only insofar there's a grade difference between Ellen Street and Bradford, but it's effectively above the Ellen Street grade level. And so everything, as I said, is internalized. And so what does that mean for the top of the podium? So that's what this plan shows, the pink or the light purple colors are the buildings themselves on top of the podium. And this is very, very schematic. Please excuse the very rough nature of it, but it shows that there's large spaces on the podium that will be used for amenities for these residents. And so what does that translate into in terms of the renderings again? So that podium shot that I just showed you, this is the top of the podium where the spaces will be integrated with the tower designs. This is where the commercial units at grade will be out on Bradford Street. There'll be residential units. You can see the individual access points coming out onto John Street. And this is the Ellen Street where the truck and vehicle traffic, the primary entrance and exit will be onto Ellen Street in this location. And here's another plan. This is just level 2 plan. Again, it's at grade on Bradford, showing the commercial units that will be fronting onto Bradford Street with access into the towers right from the road, and then some more additional 2-story units built into pedestrian access onto John with parking access internal to the site. And that's what these would show. This is the John Street. This is where those units would be located. And then this is the other shot along Bradford Street from the other end of the building. And then we're at the end now, and I can go back to any slide if anybody wants to focus in on any specific questions they have on any particular slide. But overall, Council has, at the beginning of their term, they had established council priorities. There's 5 of them. And the first one on their list, not surprising, we have a national affordable housing crisis in this country. Ontario has affordable housing crisis and a crisis in Barrie for affordable housing. And this is basically an industry first to be able to do is to propose this many affordable housing units that would be privately delivered. And then from the Council Proprietary of Community Safety, if anybody's heard the name Jane Jacobs, who was an urban thinker and an urban activist dating back, doing work back into the 60s, demonstrated that you need people living and interacting in your spaces to make them safer. It's when you don't have people living there is when you have the highest levels of safety. But in addition to community safety, you've got the benefits to downtown businesses and services of more people living downtown and paying taxes. And then what about a thriving community? Well, that's why we've proposed, rather than right now on Bradford, you have a lot of surface parking lots dominating the street. In this case, we're talking about commercial uses at grade. There's a restaurant and retail proposed on the podium floor, and then there's a luxury hotel that is proposed on the 41 to 54 store towers. It says Tower 1, it's actually Tower C on the plans. There's 80 suites that would be introduced as part of the luxury hotel. And hotel accommodation downtown has been something that Barrie has been desiring and needing for decades, going back in memory. Then, of course, infrastructure investment. We're going to need to do a lot of work to traffic work and servicing work and reviewing tall building impacts and constructability and economic viability. But it's about investing in Bradford Street, and then going on along with that is what is responsible governance. And this is a transformative impact on Bradford Street and the downtown, estimated at over $1 billion in just the construction alone, plus the spin-off benefits, plus the benefits to local businesses and services, and the collection of property taxes, as I've already mentioned. And lastly, specifically going back to the design vision, is really to incorporate those community benefits into the first phase of the project. And overall, we've got a lot of work to do, folks. This is by no means signed, sealed, and ready to be submitted and delivered to the city for approval. We're not at that point. There's a lot of technical work that we need to undertake. But we are really excited about this project, and we'd love to hear what you think. And Michael and we have our pens handy, and both of us will be available to answer questions if there's any that you would like more information from us on.